of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rest. Right now, it's time for hemp.
Thank you for taking time for hemp. I'm your host, Casper Leitch. You are listening to Time for Hemp on Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Anywhere on the internet there is sound, we are found. And I want you to please realize how important it is to end prohibition. That is what we're talking about today on the big broadcast, the need to end prohibition all around the world. Isn't that right, Your Honor?
Works for me. I think we're all trying as hard as we can to put ourselves out of this business.
That's true, and that's Judge Lenny Frieling, our joint host here on the big broadcast. And, Your Honor, I will let you bring to the table our joint guest here on Time for Hemp.
My pleasure. Today, Time for Hemp is fortunate to have with us Joseph Baldi, B-A-L-D-I. And Joseph Baldi is former law enforcement, former drug law enforcement, and currently working with LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition.cc, LEAP.cc, where you need the former law enforcement credentials to look into becoming a speaker for LEAP. And everybody can join as a supporter. And we would love to add you to our list of thousands of supporters. And Joseph Baldi, why don't we jump into this from where I'm directing us, which is in the middle, of course. What brought you to LEAP?
First of all, I just want to thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. What brought me to LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, like you said, it is a group of criminal justice and law enforcement experts, and we're working to end the war on drugs. We have over 5,000 law enforcement members. We have over 200,000 members and supporters worldwide, and like you mentioned, 200 speakers in 20 countries. I joined LEAP because I realized that this drug war was ending, and that there's police, attorneys, judges, and prison officials that we know the truth about the failed drug policy, and that we could have a profound impact on drug policy reform.
Drug policy reform starts on the sidewalk. Is that fair to say? That although we can look to the State House, we need the State House. They're important. But it starts on the street, on the sidewalk, with the individual uniforms. And I'm speaking dramatically. Am I in reality?
Yeah, that's true. You know, I started my career as a police officer with the city of South San Francisco, and I was there for 5 years until I was injured on duty. One satisfying reward, and part of my job was, you know, I was on the front line of drugs. You know, I wanted to be a dope cop. I thought that if people that used drugs were immoral and they needed to be locked up. You know, I made numerous arrests for being under the influence, being in possession of drugs. You know, I participated in undercover buy operations, did investigations, surveillance, drug dealers, execute arrests and search warrants. Then I cultivated confidential informants. So I was there. I saw the front line of the street guys who had the drugs with them. And then it went all the way up the chain. And I realized that it's a dangerous world out there, and that the drugs, the prohibition of drugs, is what's making it so dangerous.
Let's twist it around just a bit here. And let's be clear on who it is that we're talking about. Let's say I'm walking down a street, southern San Francisco, and I am being illegally rude and smoking a joint, walking down the street. Is race going to have, in your experience, race have any impact on whether I get bothered or not?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's a big misconception on the war on drugs that, you know, we end up blocking more people of color. In fact, black kids are 4 times more likely to be arrested for use and possession than white kids. But statistics have shown repeatedly that black kids aren't more likely to use than white kids. So the racial discrimination, and here in California, Hispanic and black kids are proportionally way more arrested than white kids. So that's another component of the war on drugs, marijuana prohibition, is that's a cause of a majority of the racial injustice, or a lot of the racial injustice in society. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
I'm walking down, let's put me back on that same street, even though it's starting to make me nervous. I'm walking down the same street. I'm being just as stupid, smoking my blunt outdoors in the faces of kids that really don't want anything to do with it. Is that what we're defending? Is that what we're doing when we say this stuff should be legal, regulated, taxed, controlled? What kind of a picture? Yes, please.
I mean, nobody wants kids smoking marijuana. You know who does? Except the illegal marijuana dealers.
You mean the pot dealer up the street from you in the neighborhood? 12-year-olds knock at the door. Your local dealer doesn't say, "Well, let me see your proof of age, kid."
No, see, that's another misconception with the war. The marijuana prohibition. Where do high school kids think it's easier to? What do they claim is for the last 20 years easier to get, marijuana or tobacco? Or, I'm sorry, marijuana or alcohol?
You and I both know that we hear over and over, we can get you drugs. Sure, that's no problem. Tobacco's hard. Alcohol's hard. Drugs, no problem.
Right. And there's liquor stores all over the place. So, but high school kids are completely saying that it's easier to get marijuana. Why? Well, liquor stores don't sell to kids. Drug dealers do. And not only do they sell marijuana to kids, once you go in there, hey, let's try something a little harder. Let's try something a little different. Let's, get on the harder drugs. So regulation, prohibition, it doesn't stop kids from using. There's estimated of 900,000 teenage drug dealers across the U.S. Why? Well, we spend so much time and money trying to stop prohibition that we make weed pretty valuable. Tobacco is 13 cents an ounce. Marijuana is around $400 an ounce. Wonder why there's a million teenage kids willing to sell it around our streets.
I've referred to it as a government price-supported industry, and I remain pretty comfortable with that.
Yeah, that would be a good way of saying it. Absolutely.
In California, when you were on the job there, did you develop a sense of where, and I'm thinking both in terms of marijuana as well as in terms of cocaine, meth, that type of what some of us would refer to as heavier drugs. Did you get a sense of where these drugs were originating, ending up in your area of legal responsibility, southern San Francisco?
Where were the illegal drugs coming in? Is that what
Did you get a sense of that? Correct, yes.
No.
Okay.
I really haven't thought about that.
I know that one of the things we believe we are seeing is that the flow of marijuana, in particular from Mexico, has dropped somewhat dramatically. The wholesale price may now be half of what it was bringing pot over the border. And what we're seeing is what we hoped to see, which is this dent in... Yes.
I'm sorry. No, please. Absolutely. I mean, a third of the revenue would be lost if marijuana were legal. And if it was legal, the industry could create the legal jobs with the tax dollars flowing in education and health instead of the hands of the criminals, the cartels. And to get back to your previous question, I was going back years ago because it's been quite years. And yes, during those times, of course, there was marijuana going across the border like there is now. It's just one reason that I joined this organization and realized that the drug war has failed. Do you think all those years ago when I was working as a cop that it's decreased as far as the violence and everything concerned with crossing the border? No. So it's continuing, and like you said, we're trying to make a dent out of it, and if we took just marijuana alone from the cartels, they estimate it'd be a third of their revenue would be lost.
If I went into IBM and I fired a third of the people, some of those jobs would be replaced, some would not. Sound fair?
Yep.
Okay. Let's take a look at the illegal side of drug sales, the illicit side of drug sales. I'm on the corner. I'm selling pot. I'm driving a tractor trailer from Colorado to New Jersey as a personal gift to Chris Christie, for example. And I have bad misfortune to be arrested, to be busted. So now they've taken me out of that employment market. So is my job now eliminated? Have we made this drug smuggling operation smaller now that they've arrested this big bad guy?
No.
And it really is that straightforward, isn't it?
It is. Right before my senior year in high school, there was a murder. It was a murder of a younger guy in his early 20s, and he basically was the pot dealer for the high schools in my city. It was a marijuana deal gone bad for a couple ounces of pot. This guy was shot in the head, point blank range. They caught the suspects, who were both 18 and 19 years old kids. One was about to be a father for the first time. Now, this guy, we'll say his name's Jeff, who came from a wealthy family. He had all the advantages. He didn't need the money. He just wanted the prestige and status of selling marijuana to the high school kids. Now, after this horrific murder of this drug dealer, when I went back to school senior year, do you think that the supply of marijuana stopped? Not that I would know, of course. I was, but no.
You may have heard rumors.
Yeah, absolutely. They were just rumors. And then when I became a cop in that same city years later, did the high school marijuana supply stop? No. There was some other kids there selling marijuana, kids. So the supply has never stopped. It's a game. There's players in the game. They foul out. They get ejected. The game continues. And, that was one early before I was a police officer. Just seeing how when that young guy got killed, it was a big deal. It wasn't by the time Christmas or when school started, oh, hey, no one can get marijuana. No. So it's just a cycle, and we need to end the game. And ending drug prohibition is a good way to do it.
Were you seeing heroin, H, on the streets when you were on the streets wearing blue?
Yes, black tar heroin, yeah.
And just sometimes my sarcasm is missed, and I end up just looking and sounding and frequently being confused. So I need to avoid some level of sarcasm. But black tar heroin showing up, kids can obtain it. Fair statement?
Sure.
Quality control. If I buy black tar heroin on the corner of the street today, and I go back in 2 weeks and do the same thing, same money, looks maybe about the same. Do I have any way of knowing if I'm looking at something that's 5 times as strong or not?
No, absolutely not. That's another reason we favor prohibition and some type of legal regulation of gray heroin. We need the purity. You don't know what you're getting. One time you might be getting 10%, 20%. These days, heroin is mixed with anything from, laxative to rat poison, anything. So why are there ODs? Why are there deaths? You don't know what you're getting. You don't know what you're shooting up. There's prohibition. We end prohibition. Get the health officials in there. Some regulation. We could save lives and end this vicious cycle. We need people that are addicted to substances. We need to get them out of the criminal system and into the health system.
So I believe that the use of heroin, street heroin, right now, carries the penalty of random death penalty. You're having a bad day? Oops, it's twice as strong today. Sorry, now you're dead. So we have this random death penalty for what I think all or most of the LEAP speakers would agree is a health problem. And frankly, if I got tonsillitis and the doc said, well, you got a 1 in 5 chance this will make you feel better and a 2 in 5 chance it'll kill you, that's usually not what they're telling you. And not with something where the overdose death is so easily prevented. Were we seeing Naxalon and that type of thing when you were still on the streets? What am I talking about there? So let's keep people on board up to our speed. Right. Had you run into Naxalon when you were on the streets?
No, that wasn't around. No, so I couldn't answer that.
Okay, so the drug that we now have with many of our first responders that can stop an overdose literally in its tracks and take somebody who was dead and then they're alive again. And we're seeing that.
The Narcan.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah, we didn't carry it with us on the streets. That was mostly when by the time we got them to the ERs when, we'd see numerous, the ER docs use it. But as far as, us using it on the streets, no, we didn't. But now, yes, it's prevalent. Should they be doing it? Absolutely.
Have you seen, do you know of any intelligent reason for first responders or family members we're seeing, family members with a heroin addict in the family? Is there any reason these people shouldn't have Narcan out of reach of the children, but basically stored with the aspirins if we're dealing with an addiction household?
Absolutely. I see no reason, it saves lives. You can equate it to possible person that has, medication for nitroglycerin for heart issues. Absolutely. Anyone that has a person who's living with them or a family member that has an addiction problem, and it is heroin and if Narcan or any substance, it should be readily available. I know there are a lot of nonprofits that go around, and especially in New York City and other cities that, on their own trying to save addicts from that. And I think we should allocate money once we end this drug war and prohibition and legalize, regulate it. That would be more money, resources to go to that all first responders have the Narcan.
I'm going to turn this into a loaded, hopefully no-brainer, important question that everyone should have the same answer that I do. Am I right? Is it fair for me to be thinking that, for the most part, our protectors, our help in blue, the men and women on the streets, that basically the big picture is that although some of them may have greater interest in busting dealers, do you think any significant part of our law enforcement community really believes that the random death penalty for heroin is a useful, good thing and should be insured to be part of the system?
Well, it's hard to answer that specifically. As far as, I can't speak. I just know that, of course, there's law enforcement officers who are working right now on the streets that know a lot of this is a health problem and not a criminal justice problem. But they're doing their job, and I respect that. And, they're there to enforce the laws. Can they make a difference? Of course, an individual beat officer, you need to know the people on the street. You need to know what's going on. If there are people are addicted. And, there's cities in California that do have some special outlets for that. So I know it's a hard job, especially for the guys on the street and who might think that, hey, this cycle is continuing, but they do their job. And I know there's a lot of good cops out there, and they're trying to do the best they can.
I have to tell you that what I have seen personally, professionally, in more than 4 decades of criminal defense experience. The cops that were not in the mold of what you and I would really like to see out there on the street. That is and remains in this part of the world the exception. The officers here want to help people. They want to save lives, not let drugs kill them. And politically, of course, they differ. They're human beings. They have different political views. But overall, I can tell you that from what I see, most of our people in blue would really be happier if we weren't just randomly killing people. And I've read, my intuition tells me there's truth to it, that the patrol car, as opposed to the beat cop, has had a night and day impact on the relationship between our LEOs, our law enforcement officers, and our civilians. Do you anticipate, and I think this is a slow pitch, do you anticipate that as we continue our legalization trend, that the relationship between the officers on the beat, the officers on the job, and the civilians will and is improving? Did I leave any sense to that question by the time I was done?
No, the answer to your question, absolutely. Like I mentioned before, racial inequality is a big part of the war on drugs and drug prohibition. If we legalize, the cops will, one, have more ability to violent crime, be out there with the community. If they're not out there having to worry about low-level marijuana sales or possession, then they could be out doing community policing. I remember when I was on the beat, we used to, with some of the neighborhood kids, get out of our cars, throw around the football, But when the kids have a fear of you because you're going to arrest them for a couple joints here or there, especially minority kids, then they're not going to do that. The police, again, they can't get information that they might need, because a lot of times people who are on the streets who know what's going on have an addiction problem. And when there's crimes going on in the streets and the police need to get some info, the people that really know are the ones on the street. They're not going to talk to police if they're holding, they're under the influence, because they feel, well, I can't, this guy's going to arrest me. But if we treat it as a health problem and got out of the courts and the legal system, police would be able to do their jobs more efficiently by getting information. And like I said, going out, playing football with the kids, so the kids aren't afraid of you going, oh, this is the cop that arrested my dad last week for a joint or two for a game of citation. If we get that out, we'll have way more influence with the community, and it'll see better, safer streets for all of us.
I'm thinking back to the mid-late, I'm ancient, I'm thinking back mid-late 60s, 70s. If there was a knock on the door and you looked through your viewfinder and you saw a uniform outside the door, I can tell you that back in those years and later, my initial reaction was, oh shit, there's a cop at the door. Do I have a roach out in an ashtray somewhere? And it wasn't personal. It was nothing other than, did I leave a roach in the ashtray? But when I'm answering the door to somebody doing their job, who very well may just want permission to go through my backyard to look at some guy running away with a knife, where you and I would all say, yes, of course, officer, let me give you the key to the gate, and do you want the lights on or not? I see, and I believe it will continue, and I believe it is so positive that it sounds like hyperbole when I talk about it. When an officer knocks at my door, at your door, I want to see a world in which our reaction is, oh, officer, how can I help you tonight? What's up? I'm not saying invite them into your bedroom with a video camera, but why should we be put in the position where intelligent self-preservation leads us towards being uncooperative in solving what all of us would look at and say, that's real crime? It's our relationship with the people policing the community that, from what I can see from my perspective, has so much impact in the relationship, in the closure rate, in what we solve. Is there basically trust that if an officer says, no, I'm not going to arrest that person today, we're going to have a chat? The civilians they're talking to have to know that's true. And I know that I'm jumping around, but it's a big area that's really simple and that, to my eyes, to my mind, has such an obvious, clear solution that benefits all of us that it really is truly baffling that people can think, for example, to quote the late, that means he's dead now, the late President Nixon. We could give him 4 more years, dead, alive, or both. 4 more years wouldn't solve it. 8 more years wouldn't solve it. The war on drugs cannot be won. Can we improve our situation? Well, that's what Casper and Joe and I have been talking about since we started today. And if we want to continue beyond today, I'm going to turn you over to my friend Casper and see if I can step on his best in the world Segway toes. How'd it do?
We can do that, and we can take a commercial break and pay our bills and let the world know how important it is to end the prohibition. We do encourage you to let the world also know about the wonderful content our guests are doing. We have about 20 different people broadcasting here on Time for Hemp, and they are dedicated to ending prohibition. We're going to listen to a song about how fantastic marijuana is, and then when we come back, we're going to pick up where we left off here at Time for Hemp.
Ganja, baby. Yeah, 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 yeah. I am a ganja baby, a ganja lady. I love to burn, 'cause I love to learn. The weed opens up my mind, and I ain't blind. It's not a crime to blaze the marijuana. Blaze up the talwa, the sesame, blaze up the chalice. Soon me be like ganja palace in a wonderland like the one Alice love the cannabis. Why? I am a ganja baby. Sometime me friend them call me ganja lady. Smoking that, it's no but so maybe. Blazing every day, every ganja, every day. Yeah. I am a ganja baby. Baby, friend them call me ganja lady. Lady, it's no buts, no baby. Blazing every day, me ganja crazy. The herb is so rare. If you have it in abundance, please come and share. Let the smoke go up to the air, 'cause we don't care. We have no fear to blaze the marijuana. Up the talwa, blaze the sentimental. Blaze up the kiki, love when she fat and sticky. She pretty and me love her straight to nitty gritty gritty. I am a ganja baby. Sometime me friend them call me ganja lady. Smoking, smoking, baby. Blazing every day, every day. Ganja baby, ganja lady. It's no buts, no maybe. Every day to me ganja crazy. Success is the best in the north, south, the east, and the west. Relieve the stress, and no other thing can test. Give me the herb, it's good for the nerve. Helps me to observe round the corner and curve. I see Babylon try come fi mash it down. Me ganja business, them wa crash it down. Sense this, sense that, and me hash it down. For this one, me have to get ganja, come na play around.
Yeah, I do puff, puff, pass every day, and that's what we want to say here on the big broadcast, is that every day is a day to get out and to work diligently to end prohibition. We ask that you get involved in your community and get out that front door and become part of the solution. With that said, we're going to pick up where we left off with my joint host here on the big broadcast and our joint guest here at Time for Hemp. Your Honor?
Casper, as always, thank you. It occurs to me, I love this, it occurs to me that, in fact, you and me and many of our friends and many of our enemies are doing everything we personally can to end the war on pot by burning it all up, one toke at a time. I guess I better try that again.
Oh, is that question?
So our object, 5, 4, 3. So our object with the war on drugs is to eliminate the availability of the drugs, whether it's to adults or children or both, depending on your politics. And it occurs to me that for many of us, whether it's LEAP, and that just speaks for some members, because at the end of the day, we're into individual choice as where this line is drawn. But it occurs to me that Normal, LEAP, some of the other organizations, what we're really trying to do is completely destroy the marijuana supply. And what we're doing is we're trying to destroy the entire supply by burning it. And then, of course, being ecologically minded, we don't want to add smoke to the atmosphere, so we inhale it. We're just being good citizens, trying to clean up this problem. Did you, when you were on the street, Joe, were you running into PCP, date rape, drugs? And where I'm going is, were you running into the drugs that most civilians would look at and say, whether or not you think it should be legal controlled, we don't like what it does? Was
right,
that showing?
Yeah, during my time, we had a lot of PCP use that we'd have to deal with on a weekly basis. You know, one thing I just want to get clear, that we're not encouraging the use of drugs. We realize that there are a lot of drugs that are harmful for you.
Let's be very clear about that. Thank you, please.
Right, very clear. But we believe in the adult use of responsible and ending the prohibition of it, because we believe that causes more violence and our streets less safe by keeping it in the illegal market in the hands of the drug gangs and the cartels.
Let's oversimplify for a second. Am I right if I said that the reason the drugs are on the streets, the reason for the street corner violence, is entirely, well, in large part, let's be fair, in large part, the result of the drugs being illegal, resulting in, I would say, a higher price on the street? Is there a connection between that and violence?
Oh, absolutely. You know, I mean, we just have to look at history, for example. You know, before the drug cartel in this country in the 20s and 30s, we had Al Capone and the mafia bootleggers, and they were bribing police and doing drive-by on their competitors for alcohol. You know, and how did we get rid of the alcohol game? Well, we ended prohibition and we made alcohol legal again, right? And we didn't end prohibition because we realized, well, alcohol isn't that bad for you. But we did, so we ended the violence that was destroying our cities. And you know, every dollar spent on legal marijuana, in this case, removes money from the illegal market that the cartels and the gangs rely on.
The irony of having U.S. citizens buying underground heroin with the money going to everywhere from the Golden Triangle towards Thailand, Vietnam, that part of the world. The children wouldn't know what Burma is. And I'm sorry, some of them I know way the hell more than I ever will. But we have that going on, and then we have the Taliban, ISIS, and whatever tomorrow's acronym will be, making the best heroin in the world. So what's happening is our civilians on the streets buy Afghani heroin. The money then goes through the tribal system and buys bullets. Then they shoot the bullets at us. I am speechless at trying to figure out the logic behind buying somebody else a bullet that I know they're going to shoot at me. Make sense?
Absolutely. Just like Mexican marijuana. We legalized it in California. We legalized it in Arizona, Nevada. The Mexican marijuana would no longer, well, like I said, we would not have that sensational appetite for any, and I'm not just picking on marijuana, I mean Mexican marijuana, any marijuana from any other state, any other countries, because now we have in our state, we can produce our own, it'll be legally regulated, it'll have tax, we can tax it, and those revenues go into education, prevention, treatment, and make it a health problem, get it out of the criminal justice system. But, for 40 years, we've been trying to stop the flow of marijuana crossing our borders, being distributed around our country and sold on our streets. But like I mentioned earlier, for 40 years, this has still failed. We have failed to stop the supply of marijuana crossing our borders. Legalization, ending prohibition, will do that. Make a huge difference.
And let's be really clear. There is no one, zero, people that I have met through LEAP, particularly the Speakers Bureau, former law enforcement, the people that are standing up in front of hundreds and hundreds of anti-drug, keep it illegal and don't even talk to me about it kinds of crowds. I cannot think of having met a single speaker who even suggested that it was a good idea to enjoy or use in any other way the kinds of drugs we're talking about. It's a choice issue, and some choices we make are bad. Some choices compromise our immune system. But at the end of the day, we're not communists. We're capitalists. We're Americans. So if we choose, and choose is a good word, if we choose to grow high-quality marijuana, guess what? We will do it. We're Americans. We're not communists. And I say that with a smile. And we all know just what I mean. We don't need to outsource and give up our opportunity to regulate with any of these drugs. Changing the subject without changing it. We talk about shake and bake, one of the newer methods for making methamphetamine in a 2-liter soda bottle in the front seat of the car. When that is adequately legally addressed, one of these really very sharp chemists will come up with a new method that doesn't take red Sudafed or match heads or whatever it is this week. We're not fighting against the lab work of idiots. Some of these lab people are very smart. But when was the last time you heard of Merck or Pfizer or any of the Sandoz, any of these major worldwide conglomerate drug legal manufacturers? When was the last time you heard of one of them blowing up one of their labs?
Exactly. If they do, it's not on Twitter. No, I never.
Well, right. They just don't do it much. And when they do it, where are they? Oh, yeah, in a commercial building with proper ventilation, filtration, emergency showers that any high school chemistry lab should have these days. Hoods When was the last time, let me ask it this way. You've participated in busts of meth labs. Can I say that?
No. To be honest, no.
Yeah, good. I love the truth.
Hey, just being honest here.
Thank you. It's one of our greatest strengths. We don't have to twist the facts. The facts support what we're trying to say, so we're good with them. What I was hypothesizing, and I don't want you making up an answer just as you said, I'm not going to make up an answer. What I am speculating is this. While in a high school chemistry lab, we will almost certainly have the emergency chemical pull on the cord and you're scrubbed off from whatever you shouldn't have spilled on yourself to begin with. Oh yeah, how about an exhaust hood? So when you're handling sulfuric acid, it's properly vented. High school chemistry lab standards. I wonder how many illicit, gray market, or just straight black market meth labs have the emergency shower, the ventilation, the lab training, the proper lab equipment. There are still people trying to cook with butane, not even using what we call a closed system. And you can see how much it annoys me, given that part of my background, which is in a chemistry lab. It's
yeah, and I understand what you're saying. That's why we need to get the underground illegal market out, whether it's meth, coke, heroin, marijuana. If we end prohibition, legalize, and have legal regulation of these drugs, we get these crazy meth labs out of our cities, out of our rural areas, that they're not obligated to anyone but themselves except to make money. So once that becomes legal, you get rid of that illegal black market, our areas are safer, our kids are safer, and then I don't ever have to fantasize about being in a meth lab because they'll be all over. They'll be done.
And I'm thinking, how often does the EPA do a legitimate inspection of the runoff water from a large outdoor grow? Well, we know the answer is zero. Oh, unless it happens to be government regulated. Then we can send in the electrical inspector to make sure the wiring is at least done to code. That's not an unreasonable expectation of our fellow citizens, that their neighbor's wiring is to code. That's a legitimate government function. On the other hand, the rest of the story with the shake and bake, the front seat of the car makes some meth in a 2-liter soda bottle. Let's get to the exciting conclusion of that. Their front seat tweaker, meth user, is shaking up their 2-liter bottle, and it blows up in their face. Well, that's a problem. They are now a burn victim, one of the most expensive victims to treat in a hospital. And since hospitals have a regulation to treat, there have been a significant number of burn units in the United States that have been forced economically to close the doors because they couldn't afford to pay for approximately 1/3 of their patients who were tweaker explosions. Okay, so the person's lucky. They don't blow up in their face. They don't end up in the burn unit. And they now have this 2-liter bottle of residue of the kind of chemicals that when I was setting up the organic chemistry lab for the high school students to come in and have their lab set up and be ready, these were things I sure didn't like working with in a lab coat, with the rubber gloves, with the hood, the whole bit. And the training to theoretically not blow myself off and blow myself up often. I only blew myself up once. But my point is, instead of directing these activities, which are potentially dangerous, instead of directing them towards places where there is training, where there is control, where there is proper, appropriate lab equipment, what do? We drive it into the front seat of a 57 Chevy going down the highway and keep our fingers crossed. I can just see it now. One of the fabulous furry freak brothers, 90 miles an hour down the interstate, guy riding shotgun, shaking up the meth, and Hunter S. Thompson in the rumble seat, patiently waiting. That's not the world we're trying to create.
Nope, not at all. And that's why we need to end prohibition. And, it creates cartels, the drug gangs, it destroys lives through the, we didn't even get into the lifelong collateral consequences of convictions. It's just a major source of racial inequality in this country. And so we get out the shake and bake tweakers from doing that, endangering the citizens. I know people have a hard time they feel that legalization is scary. But again, I have to emphasize what it really means is legally regulating it and taking that profit out of the illegal market, just like we did in Prohibition in the 20s and 30s. We ended that. As a kid, I used to watch The Untouchables and go, man, that's crazy. These guys used to fight over beer and wine? Like, that's insane. Well, we're doing the same thing now. So we need that.
There's one very, very, very positive side to the American war on crime of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Some of the best movies ever made came out of the war on drugs. Little Caesar, the Al Capone movies, the movies that came out of the war on drugs and still are. Boy, that's a long list of good movies. And if that were the downside, we'd all be agreeing and this war would be over and we'd be at the movies.
Absolutely.
Let's think.
But we're still making movies now because we have El Chapo, and that's, the alcohol prohibition created Al Capone. Well, drug prohibition created El Chapo and all the other cartel leaders and kingpins.
The challenging part is the contrast, what many people think of as the romantic Al Capone side of things, and the sad, dark, bloody reality, more the Sin in the City kind of film noir approach, except we've made it a reality. We have chosen to make that a reality. Oh, and by the way, a little while ago, we left. Let's come back to it. We left 2 liters of toxic waste in a carbonated beverage 2-liter plastic bottle. And where we last left our heroic 2-liter plastic bottle, it was filled with toxic chemical waste in the front seat of the car. So what do you do with it? Well, you drive to the nearest police station for amnesty and you say, look, I found this whole meth lab and I just want you to dispose of it properly. Is that what people do? Maybe not. Do they take this 2 liters of toxic mess and toss it out their front window to live and die on the shoulder of the road? How can that be the right answer? Well, it can't be. I get to be dramatic, and the irony is... Yes.
No, I was just going to agree with you. It can't be, and that's why we need to end prohibition and make it a health issue instead of incarceration and the criminalization and the prohibition of drugs.
I love putting it that way. We cannot be over dramatic because the reality just simply is that dramatic. We really are destroying minority communities, whether it's Latino in Colorado, whether it's a darker skin color in Maryland and Baltimore, whatever it is. We are destroying societies within our society because of their color, because we're treating a drug problem, a medical problem as a criminal problem. So not only are we destroying ourselves, we're destroying our families, we're destroying our core families. When somebody rolls, all right, I get busted, and I've decided I'm going to become a confidential informant. And you're working with me, you're my law enforcement contact. Who is it that you're going to end up having me bust? Is it going to be a stranger on the corner or my brother and best friend? Who did that end up
Right.
being?
Yeah. It's buddies, the guys he lives in the neighborhood. It'll be maybe the guy that has a couple more ounces in his safe, but of course, it's just that cycle that, hey, let's get these young dealers, and then they can lead us up through the chain. Well, first of all, you're going to arrest numerous people, time and effort of trying to get the one guy in the neighborhood that has maybe one or two keys coming in, get it off the street, absolutely. But let's regulate it. Let's end the prohibition. Let's get it out of that neighborhood to begin with. The way you do that, legalize and prohibition. Get it into regulated medical facilities, dispensaries. Get it out of the hands of the illegal market. Crime will go down. Violence will go down. Guys aren't going to be on the street and shooting people because they just want that area of the neighborhood because it has better lighting in that district. It's because of the drug wars. It's the drug turf. That's why there's guns on the streets. That's why there's gangs. And that's what makes cops on the beat, on patrol, they're up more dangerous. If they're carrying drugs, they're not usually carrying weapons with no drugs. The two go hand in hand.
And the magic piece that links it all together in my mind, the root of the evil, the drugs have very high value. If they had no value, there's no crime connected with them for the most part. But as you said, absolutely, you give these white powders tremendous value, that's an awful lot of incentive to be a criminal. I had a case just recently where the way the numbers shook out, it was fairly easy. It is fairly easy to have $250,000 profit in the trunk of the car. In the old days, we would think of cocaine dollars, cocaine numbers, cocaine fines. I think once you start dealing with potentially $250,000 in profit in the trunk of the car, I think that is going to start looking more like the cocaine model of the 70s, 80s, 90s, which we all know. Boy, I'm thinking almost reminiscent of the Al Capone shoot 'em all with Thompson submachine guns kind of mentality.
Absolutely. That's you hit it right on the head. So if we make them less valuable, how do we do that? Ending the prohibition, legalizing them, it will take the crime, it'll make it less valuable. As I mentioned earlier, marijuana's approximately $400 an ounce. Tobacco's 13 cents an ounce. And throughout the years, we spend billions and billions of dollars of trying to stop the flow of these drugs coming in. That's why they're so valuable. That's why in the 20s and 30s with Al Capone and alcohol, it was valuable because it was illegal. It's just common sense. And, I believe we're coming around. There's these days there's this bipartisan support, and I believe that it's coming around. It'll just be a matter of time. And now in California, with the Adult Use of Marijuana Act being on the November ballot, we need to start here in California and legalizing it for adults. Again, adult use and this prohibition of marijuana here in California to start. And then we need to keep going.
And there's, on the one hand, there's the bull crap. I think I can say bull crap and not have the FCC. I don't know, I can't speak to NSA. But instead of dealing with the bull crap, if we deal with the science, and not that Hillary Clinton, and I'm not saying support, don't support, I don't mean to imply that, but people of great power saying, oh, we really don't know anything, and yes, we certainly need more research. That is such ignorant claptrap. It infuriates me. There's a website used by scientists. It's open free to anyone. So you go to pub, as in public, med, as in medicine, PubMed. You go to their site, you ask a question. Studies on marijuana, or even just stick in the word marijuana. So for a chemical, for a plant that we are continuously told, oh, but we don't know anything about it yet, and we're experimenting on our kids. Well, not only do we have our 5,000 to 10,000 years of non-toxic success, we also, if you just plug in the word marijuana into PubMed, you will hit right now more than 20,000 peer-reviewed studies. I ask you, we're old enough to remember thalidomide. Not all of our listeners are. I ask you, do you think there were 20,000 studies done that related to the potential horrific birth control defects created by an FDA-approved drug, thalidomide? Do we go for... Yes.
Marijuana is the most widely studied weed ever in the world. It's like you just reiterated.
Over time, over generations, over huge numbers of people. And the more we look, the more we find good stuff.
And speaking of over, so is this hour. And we're going to have to wrap it up and let the world know about your favorite website or organization that you might want to put a spotlight on. And we'll start with our joint guest first.
Joe, what have you got for a plug that interests you today, catching your attention, that you want to get the word out?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And, just concluding today, just wanted to go back to that regarding marijuana prohibition and drug prohibition. It's making our streets less safe. It creates the cartels and the drug gangs, and it's destroying the lives. And that's why I joined Leitch. That's why the DEA agents, police chiefs, and judge prosecutors, we all agree that if we end prohibition and replace it with legal regulation, we'll make our community safer. And I would like, everyone who's listening, if you want to stay connected with Leap, go to leap.cc. You could join us on Facebook or Twitter. And we really like to have you. And we really like you to get the word out that there are law enforcement officers who know the truth about the drug war. And we believe that ending it will make our community safer. Have this discussion with your friends and family. And let's make a difference.
And Your Honor?
Thanks, Casper. Joe Baldi, thank you for being with us. And I am reminded once again, as I have been saying since before 1998, shared knowledge is power. That's why we're here. Let's get the reality out there. Leap, LEAP.cc. Join as a supporter. Become a speaker if you meet the requirements for that. Let's get the word out. The truth is our friend. Jumping over really quickly. My Canary app. My as in it's mine. Canary as in tweet. App is in app, all one word, .com. MyCanaryApp.com is an iPhone app that we've come up with that rather than trying to measure chemistry that tells us nothing, whether it's cheek swab or whatever, and gives us true measurements of behavior like reaction time and the like. Casper, as always, I love you, man, and thanks.
And I want to remind people that we are not just a 1-hour broadcast anymore, but we are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, dedicated to ending prohibition all around the world. And as you know, Time for Hemp is like a great joint. It's always best when you share us with your friends.